Hello. Hi, everybody. A very warm welcome to everybody to this autumn's edition of Financial Fitness Fridays. Today is a budget special, so I'm just going to tell a little bit about what to expect today. I have a fantastic guest I'm going to be interviewing in a moment. I'll tell you a bit about him in a second. Now, we want today to be interactive as much as possible, so there is a Q&A function on the Zoom here. So please feel free, as we're going throughout this session, to put your questions in there. And then at the end, what I'll do is pull out some of those questions that are potentially relevant for the majority of people, and we'll put those to Tom. I do have some questions he knows that are coming, so we might be able to catch him out later on. The plan is that we're going to have a hard stop at 30 minutes. For those of you that will need to get on with other meetings and things, you can duck out. And then at the 30-minute interval, whoever's left then will open up that to a Q&A session. That normally goes on for another, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. So we'll see how that goes. And the other thing we'd like to know also, get some feedback from you. So in the Q&A or in the chat function, Q&A would be better actually, if you could just let us know going forward for future Financial Fitness Fridays, what areas of finance you would be interested in, and what we'll look at the most popular ones. We're planning to do it next year, at least every couple of months, plus a few specials in there as well. So let me tell you a bit about Tom, and I'll get him to introduce himself in a minute. So Tom is a financial planner at Foster De Novo. He's one of the new generation of financial planners, because most of us are getting older and older now, but we've got some young blood coming through like Tom. I did a interview with him prior to this session, very, very impressed. So he helps clients with, with savings and investments and pensions and insurances and estate planning and all that good stuff. But what's particularly useful about Tom is he comes at things holistically, and he creates a financial plan for people, structuring their finances to make sure they achieve their objectives in their life. So he looks at it very differently, and I was very impressed. Not only that, I noticed some of the really great books he's been reading on his shelf behind him in the camera. So look, Tom, can you reveal yourself, please? Are you there?
Thank you very much, Darren. Yes, I am. Nice to join you all.
Thanks very much, mate. Welcome aboard. Well, look, you know the questions that are going to come up. So what I'll do is I'm going to ask those questions. If there's any sort of clarification on certain key points, then we'll do that as well along the way. We do have to finish at 30 minutes, and then we'll test you out at the end with some of the questions that you are not prepared for. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect. Sounds good.
Okay, well, look, obviously the budget, this that budget, it seems that it's happened a couple of weeks back, but over time it seems sort of like more and more things seem to be unfolding with it. It did seem a bit harsh on businesses. But what do you think, Tom, from your perspective and what you're picking up out there in your work, what impact do you think this could have on people's personal finances?
Yeah, I think the overall takeaway from the budget was if you pay attention to the financial press, there was a lot of noise and hysteria pre-budget. I had some clients that felt quite nervous and anxious about potential changes that were coming up, and we had to sort of reassure them and tell them that we can't make decisions based on what might happen. We can only make decisions based on what we know, is happening and sort of hard facts really. So yes, you've got to pre-plan as much as you can, but the lead up to the budget was, if you do follow the financial press, there were a lot of headlines that potentially tax-free cash from pensions was going to be reduced, potentially tax relief on the way into pensions was going to be reduced, along with a whole load of other things with capital gains tax rates and the likes. And yes, there have been some changes. Income tax rates have stayed the same, which is great because that's one of the biggest impacts on most working people. So I think the overall takeaway was that, yes, there have been changes, but the impact to the majority of people's day-to-day lives, there hasn't been a huge impact straight away. I did speak to a client straight after the budget, and she's a farmer's daughter, and she's got a load of buy-to-let properties. So she's in the niche of where somebody really has felt a bit of a squeeze off the budget. I think the one big change which may or may not affect employees is the increase to national insurance contributions for employers. So although that doesn't directly affect employees' national insurance position, employers are now going to have to pay more money towards national insurance contributions when they're paying income. For anyone that doesn't know, when a company pays an income, they've got to pay national insurance contributions on that income, on that salary. And you as the employee, you've got to pay national insurance contributions as well. So there's going to be an increased cost to businesses. Now, how businesses pass on that increased cost or whether they absorb it themselves will really be down to individual companies. You can imagine if a company is performing well and they're continuing to grow throughout this period of time, they may absorb that cost. It's going to ring true that companies are going to want to maintain and keep hold of good talent within the business, and they're not going to want to lose that through sort of stagnant wages and growth for people within a company. So yes, there have been changes within the budget. You know, those people that are in the 50s will have worked through 30 years of budgets and changes of governments. Those people in the late 20s, early 30s will probably work through another 20 or 30 years of budgets and changes in government. And you can't affect what, you know, as us as individuals, we can't affect what's going to happen in the budget. All we can do is manage our own finances and have some peace of mind that we're doing that and we're managing our finances as well as possible. And then we're just refining whatever plan that we've got in place as and when things change due to legislation, budgets, etc.
So I think what you're saying there is then that possibly some employers might be forced to restrict the amount of pay rise they give people to cover this extra cost, and that's how it might impact on what they, the working people sort of definition that's come out now. Is that basically what you're saying then?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if there's an increased cost to businesses to pay a salary, our pay rise is going to increase at the same rate as they would have done pre-national insurance contributions going up pre-budget, and that is individual to each company, right? So it depends how they absorb that cost.
Yeah, I suppose that if you turn it around the other way, that gives employees the motivation to help their employer succeed. And if they're in a good place, then that might not have to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And there are ways that individuals can minimize national insurance contributions. Making pension contributions, reduces the amount of national insurance that you pay as an individual. So it's not a sort of black and white line as to what comes out off the back of this.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So, okay, so we're looking at it quite broadly now then. So in terms of going forward, if we're talking to employees and working people, what action could they take or should they be taken as a result of the current situation? What do you think?
Yeah, I think as a result of the current situation, it's reassessing where your finances are. Um, I always encourage everybody that I speak to, whether it's a client that's early on in their working life, whether it's a client later on in their working life, to go through the same process. Ideally, once a year minimum. Some people like to do it quarterly, some people half yearly. And that process is always the same, right? So you look at your net income, the income after tax. If you don't know it, you jump on your bank statement and have a look at how much comes in from your employer each month. You take the amount of money that you earn each month after tax. We then have a look at what your basic outgoings are. So you'd add up your mortgage or your rent, your food, your travel, your bills, everything that you need to keep the roof above your head and to keep the light switched on, basically.
Yeah.
And your tummy full, because that's important as well. We take your basic outgoings and then we look at your discretionary spending as well. So that's, all the things that you spend to enjoy life day to day. You can't just spend money on the basics and not have, anything left over. So unless you're spending above your means and more than you've got coming in, there should be then some disposable income left over. That disposable income, we're then looking at where that's going. If you're making pension contributions into your workplace scheme, that'll be coming, if it's via salary sacrifice, off your income at the top. So that'll be before obviously your net income. It's then looking at, well, how much contributing towards savings? Do I have something like an investment ISA? Do I make further contributions to a pension? What am I putting into to insurances if they're suitable and the right for me? If other people are financially dependent on me, I'm no longer here anymore. Something happens to me health wise. Does that have a financial impact on other people? What am I doing to minimize the impact of that? So yes, we can get lost quite quickly in the intricacies of the budget, but going through that process either once a year or every time there's a change, financially through something like a budget. It's a really worthwhile exercise, and that just gives you a lot more control of your own finances. You've got visibility of it. A lot of people don't do it because they don't like to see the numbers, but I can promise you now that how you feel about your finances before going through that process to how you feel about your finances after going through that process, I often find with clients, it's like a, sort of cloud lifted from above them, or a weight lifted off the shoulders, where, they're then going, right, I've got some visibility over where my finances sit. And then you can start to look at, well, what is your plan and what is your strategy with that disposable income you've got, or excess savings that people might have.
So I think what you're saying there is then, the advice to people is really to get on the front foot, take the first step in the right direction, start to take control of your money. A budget plan can do that. And I think, that's important from a financial well-being perspective, because we can't control what happens in budgets. We can't control inflation. We can't control taxation. We can't control government. But we can control how we run our own financial lives. And so therefore we just need to focus on that. If we feel in control of most things financial, then we're going to subdue stresses and financial anxiety and worry. So that's good advice, I think, to get on the front foot, know what's going on, and doing some budgeting. It sounds a bit dull, doesn't it? Do some budgeting, do a budget plan. I have heard some great stories of people who do that. Even people, our clients, who some of their clients are very high net worth, high earning individuals. It's still about living within their means and having and doing a budget and know what's going on. So, do you know where people could go to get a reasonable, nice, simple to use budget planner?
Yeah, sites like Money Helper will have a budget planning tool within it. If you Google budget planner, there'll be hundreds of different links that you see come up, and any one of them, as long as you can put in your net income, your outgoings, it leaves you with some disposable income. Obviously, a key question is then what you do with the disposable income, which we can probably talk about a bit later on. But have a look online. There'll be apps that you can do it with. There are various online tools. So, that's a good start.
Okay. Well, I think budget planner, moneyhelper.org, moneyhelper, one word.org is the website. I'd always recommend that one, because they're not trying to lead you down the road to any particular financial services product. But these kind of things that are online are often there to try and draw attention and take you on a journey to borrow some money, or to consolidate some loans, or to take out an investment product. Okay, fantastic. So taking that first step in the right direction, that's really good. There is just your view on this one would be really useful, Tom. And that is that obviously there's a lot of speculation around how this budget will impact future growth and inflation. So, what's your thoughts on that? And then what should people be thinking about doing for themselves?
Yeah, the OBR forecast that came off the budget. So these are people that look at the impact on the cut on the country off the back of the decisions that are made in the budget. Inflation is meant to, fall to between 2 and 3% over the next 5 years. Growth figures are going to be, anywhere between sort of 1 and 2% over the next 5 years, and that's real growth after inflation. Borrowings increased, the government borrowings increased. So they're looking to put money into things like infrastructure projects and building hospitals and bridges, etc., etc. So on a sort of nationwide scale, the budget is aiming to increase growth within the country. Now, most budgets will say that they want to increase growth within the country, right? That's the aim of a government to increase productivity and growth. Whether that actually happens and what sectors it happens in, that's a sort of wait and see question. It just always goes back to me to you can only do what you can do as an individual, which is to make contributions to short-term needs, medium-term needs, long-term needs. Whether it's growth personally through pay rises, bonuses, etc. Whether it's growth in the economy, which obviously if the UK economy grows, most people's pension funds will have some money invested in the UK economy somewhat, so shares in UK companies. That will then lead to ultimately to growth for things like pension funds. There's been some talk recently about some quite technical points around certain government pensions and trying to unlock money within pensions to get some more growth within the country. So everything that's coming out from the government is pro-growth. How much of a pro-growth budget it actually was, we'll wait and see, right? It's always one to, the proof's in the pudding with these sort of things. So yeah, that's where we're at with that.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been in this industry a long time now, and if I go back, I mean, I was talking to individual clients 35 years ago, before you were born, Tom, and and I think the best investment I found that those people, the people that's really succeeded with their financial planning, the best investment that they made was actually an emotional investment in their goals and objectives in life. Those ones seem to get that kind of narrow-minded focus. They wanted, the short term, the medium term, the long term goals. They got very clear on those, and they started to work towards them, and it kind of helped them make better decisions going forward. It gave them much more resilience, and I think having that plan to achieve objectives, I think that makes us more resilient, come what may, whatever governments throw at us in terms of budgets and changes and stuff like that. What's your thoughts around that as a concept?
Yeah, it's interesting. It throws me back to sitting down with two clients last year. They were in a two-bed flat. They'd bought their first property together. They were looking to start a family, and they quickly realised if they had a couple of kids, a two-bed flat isn't going to fit enough children in. So we sat down and looked at if they sell the flat for X amount of money, and the mortgage was Y, how much money they would have from the sale of the property. There's other things you've got to factor in. So when you sell a property, there's usually agent fees that you've got to pay to sell the property. So we looked at how much money would be sat within, or that they would have off the back of selling their property. We then looked at the price that we think that they would want to buy a property for, and realised that there's some savings that they need to make, because the amount of money they had within their property wasn't enough to put down as a deposit on the new property. So we looked at it and we basically said, right, if they save £1,500 a month over an 18-month period, when 18 months is up, they know that they're going to have enough money to pay for the stamp duty, pay for the put into the deposit, pay for a surveyor to come round and survey the property, so they know that the properties, the buying is good enough to live in. So going through that process with them really helped align that point about, look, here's something that's important to us. We want to make this happen. But at the minute, they don't feel like they've got much control over it, because they're sort of in the dark a bit, because they don't know what the figures are. So we sit down with them and go, right, here's some cost to bear in mind for moving. Here's what you want to buy for. There's a difference as to how much money you're going to be left over with. If you save X amount of money for 18 months, we're going to be at the position in 18 months' time where you can buy the property. And they're looking to do that probably spring, Q1 2025, and then they're on track to do so. So it's really important to sit down and go through that process of, we'll still do it on a piece of paper sometimes. We'll go short term, medium term, long term. Right, next 5 years, what's important to you? I want to do X, Y, Z, whether it's to do with your career, whether it's family, whether it's lifestyle. Medium term, what's important to you? Is it, moving house again? Is it starting a family? Is it how many holidays that you want to go on? Is it lifestyle stuff? And long term is, by what point do you want to be in a position where you don't have to go to work anymore if you don't want to? So the term retirement is often used, but what I find now is a lot of people, what we call staircase the retirement, where they go from working 5 days to 4, 4 to 2, and then finally stop working. But when do you want to be in a position, at what age do you want to be in a position where you can turn around and say, actually, if I don't want to work anymore, I don't have to? And then you can start to sort of work backwards from that and go, well, how much money in today's terms do I think I want to be able to live off in retirement? Is it £2,000 a month? Is it £3,000 a month? Is it four? Whatever that is, and that'll be individual to everyone. And then we can start to cash flow and look at, well, what do you need to put in order to get to where you want to get to, factoring in all these different things.
Yeah, just one other thing, whilst we've got 5 minutes or so, that's been coming up quite a lot. And I know a lot of people have been potentially using their pension pots as almost an inheritance tax avoidance vehicle, if you like. And it was kind of default because the people used to buy annuities in the old days where they'd exchange their cash for an income. And because nowadays more people are utilizing drawdown and leaving the money invested. But when they passed that on to their loved ones, that was tax free. And the inherited pensions are going to be taxable now. They're liable to inheritance tax. So, is there anything that anyone can do about that, or they should do? How should they think about that?
I think the first thing is it was almost a bit of a fluke as to pensions being classed as what we call outside of the estate for inheritance tax purposes. Um, so with that in mind, well, what's the whole purpose of a pension? The purpose of a pension is to give you an income for your life in retirement when you stop working. Does a pension still allow people to do that in an incredibly tax efficient way? Yes, it does. If you're making pension contributions into your workplace pension scheme via salary sacrifice, let's take somebody who's got a salary of, let's call it £30,000. If you're salary sacrificing 10% of your earnings, what you're doing is you're saying, actually, 10% of my £30,000 income, so £3,000, I'm not going to get paid that. What's going to happen is my employer is going to put it straight into the pension scheme for me. So because of that, you're now only getting paid £27,000, but you're only paying tax on £27,000 of earnings instead of paying tax on £30,000 of earnings. So there's a huge saving. If you're getting paid that money, you've got to pay income tax on it. If you're not getting paid that money and it's going straight into the pension, that example there would be a basic rate taxpayer at 20%. So there's a 20% tax saving on the money going into the pension. For anyone that earns over £50,000, there's a 40% tax saving. Plus, there's also a saving on the national insurance contributions that you would have otherwise paid on the income. So the starting point with that is pensions are still an incredibly tax efficient vehicle to use to save for retirement. Um, yes, they're going to be by 2027. The plan is to bring them into the equation for inheritance tax calculations. It's worth noting that for inheritance tax purposes, if you've got a married couple, everything that's left from one spouse to another is exempt from inheritance tax. It's only paid on what we call second death. It's all
Right.
quite a morbid subject. So when we speak to clients about it, we always joke around about killing one of them off first and then keeping the other one alive and how it all sort of works from transferring of assets. There's also what we call nil rate bands available, which is an amount of money within your estate which you're allowed before you start paying inheritance tax. And that's £325,000 per person. And if you leave your residential property to a child, there's another 175,000 person. So there's 500,000 pounds of potential allowance that's available for an individual, up to £1 million for a joint couple. So it's only going to affect um, people up to that limit. There's little in the way that you can do to minimize the amount of inheritance tax that you pay on your pension, other than, well, use it in retirement and use it to enjoy life when you're retired.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned that because that's 325,000 we all get, that was set in 2009. That hasn't increased since then. So that's that's almost like that's more tax by stealth, isn't it? Effectively, as assets go up and things get more valuable, but the threshold stayed the same. So I don't suppose there's any light on the end of the tunnel on that one. It's 325, and that's it. It's not any thoughts about, is that ever going to change?
Well, I think they did say they were looking at certainly with the income tax thresholds, they were looking at increasing them after 5 years to start going up in line with inflation. Whether or not they do with inheritance tax thresholds, it's something to be seen. But there was a lot of talk around, the first 2, 3, 4 years of this government's manifesto is all around trying to solidify the books as they call it, and then there may be things like the first £12,570 that somebody earns is tax free. If that level's kept to that level over the next 3, 4, 5 years, well, more people are going to start creeping up into that if wages increase. That's been set at a steady level. The plan is at some point to increase that. So we'll see, what happens with that alongside the nil rate bands that are available for inheritance tax.
Yes, I think the sort of message that's coming loud and clear from you today really is about feeling in control, resilience, have a plan, so that whatever happens or whatever governments and the world throws at us, we are in better shape to better cope with it, so that we are more in control than out of control. Is that kind of where you're coming from when you think about what this budget and your clients?
Yeah, exactly. You can only manage your own finances. You can't manage everybody else's finances or the country's finances. So you sit down, you look at yours, you go through that net income, you go through your basic outgoings, your discretionary spending, what's left over, and where does that go? Now, if your biggest objectives are, something over the next 3, 4, 5 years, that disposable income might have to be kept in savings. it might be that you say, actually, there's not too many big one-off costs over the next 2 or 3 years. Yes, I'll hold an emergency fund in savings. So if the boiler breaks and the car breaks down, you've got some money to fall back on so you don't then get into debt. But
Yeah.
above the emergency fund, you might then have surplus capital, surplus income that you're then looking to invest to achieve growth with. Whether that's through an investment ISA, whether it's through your pension, depends on how old you are. So if you're 30, 35 years old, you might not want to put all of your disposable income into your pension. Yes, there's great tax relief for doing so, but obviously you can't access that money until 10 years before state retirement age. So you may say, actually, should I start looking at an investment ISA to achieve growth? Money can be invested. Generally speaking, a medium risk investment will outperform inflation, and inflation will outperform cash over a 5-year period. So what's important to everybody is that their investments, whether it's a pension investment or whether it's a stocks and shares ISA investment, are achieving growth ahead of inflation. I wouldn't be looking at it over any 1 year period because, as we saw, not this year but the previous year, returns on cash were generally speaking higher than investment returns. What we've seen this year is it's the other way around. So you don't want to look at it in any 1 year in isolation. If your objective is to invest money for a period of 20 or 30 years in your pension, you've got to take a long-term view of that. If your objective is to invest money through an investment ISA over a 5, 10, 15-year period, you've got to look at it through the lens of that time frame.
Yeah, let's just finish on that point you talked about there. And inflation, inflation can erode the true value of your money and your cash, especially if it's just invested in cash and deposits. And there's a great metaphor that I picked up years ago from somebody where they said it's a bit like having a large block of ice in your back garden in the sunshine, and you go about your daily activities, and every time you look round at the block of ice, it looks exactly the same. Nothing's changed, but very, very slowly but surely that sun is melting that block of ice away. And that's kind of a great kind of a metaphor for how inflation can have an impact on the value of the real spending power of cash.
Yeah, inflation. Just to recap, it's the increase in the price of goods and services. So if everything's getting more expensive by say 2.5% per annum, if your money's only growing by 1 or 1.5% per annum, there's a 1% loss in real terms. So it's why Freddos used to be 5p and now they're 50p, right? That's inflation. Space Invaders used to be 10p, they're now up at 50p, 70p. Things generally speaking, get more expensive over time. So you need the value of your money to increase in value over time as well. Otherwise, it's why £10,000 was more money in real terms 20, 30 years ago than it is today. You could buy more things with £10,000 30 years ago than you can today. That's inflation.
Well, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Tom. That brings us round to the 30-minute mark. I'm just going to do the regulatory stuff and share the here we go. Share that slide. Put that on there so people can read that. Okay. So I'm just going to stop the share now. So those of you on the session that need to go off to your next meetings, then we've come to an end now. We do have quite a few questions, so I'm going to look through those. For those of you that can stick around, feel free to stick your questions in the Q&A, and I'll start to look at some of the questions we've already got. So, are you ready, Tom?
I am, yes.
Okay, my son is currently self-employed, wants to start pension planning. What's the best place for him to start?
Yeah, good question. If you're self-employed, you don't benefit from employer pension contributions, so you've got to make them yourself. A personal pension is the best place to start. Often it can be referred to as a self-invested personal pension, a SIP. One of the issues with the financial industry is we often have multiple different phrases and names for the same thing, but if you see SIP or personal pension, it's likely referring to something similar. So setting up a personal pension would be ideally in that situation. The way it works for somebody that's self-employed, you can then claim tax relief on the pension contributions that you've made. So there'll be some immediate tax relief, which is added by the provider. And then depending on your tax band, you then may be able to reclaim further tax relief when you complete your self-assessment tax returns, which everybody who's self-employed has to do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so quick ones here. We sort of touched on this already. Someone's asking about apps. Are there any apps that might be helpful with regards to budgeting?
Yes. As somebody who is FCA regulated, if we get into the habit of recommending apps and that sort of thing and providers to people, probably getting a bit of hot water. I think the key thing to look at when you're having a look at which apps are most suitable, obviously have a look at the costs and charges of the platforms that you're using. If you're using, budget planners, they're usually, you can obtain them for free. If you're then looking at opening an investment ISA, if you're looking at opening a separate pension, that's where you've got to do your own due diligence. There's two options. You can either do these things yourself or you can take financial advice. Depending on where you are in life will depend on, which route's best for you. So, yes, people can do these things themselves or they can take, financial advice alongside it.
Okay, brilliant. Now I've got a interesting question here for you. Is there a view whether investing in pensions is better than investing in our stocks and shares ISA 10 years from retirement? What's your thoughts on that?
Really, really good question. It's quite infrequent that we will ever recommend somebody just to put money in one place, right? We talk about savings, we talk about ISAs, we talk about pensions, and that's because they all have different features. So if we think about 10 years out from retirement, what we're trying to do is put in place a structure to allow people to be nice and tax efficient when they get to retirement when it comes to drawing an income. An investment ISA allows you to invest money free of income tax, free of capital gains tax. So that means when you come to draw down from your investment ISA, there's no income tax that's paid on the income that you take from it. So if you coincide a pension and an ISA when you get to retirement, it's a really helpful tool to then be able to say, actually, I'll take some money from a pension. We can look at the tax implications of that. There's typically 25%, which is tax-free, and the rest is taxable. So using pensions and ISAs when we get to retirement is really helpful. Depending on the amount of assets somebody already has in a pension, already has in an ISA, will depend on, let's just say we've got £100 to keep numbers round. Do we put £80 in the pension and £20 in the ISA? Do we put £80 in the ISA, £20 in the pension? Do we put £50 in the ISA, £50 in the pension? So it's always going to be circumstantial depending on where someone is, but ideally using both of those tools is really helpful. And another key thing, I never think it's too late to start with this. If somebody's 5 years, 4 years out from retirement, it doesn't mean they should go, oh, well, I'm 4 years out from retirement. I've probably missed the boat a bit. Actually, I'll just leave it for now. There's still value in helping to provide more structure to your finances.
Well, sort of slightly related to that is another question, actually quite interesting. We get this one quite a lot over the years as well. Somebody's got an ISA already, they've got a workplace pension scheme, they've also got a mortgage, and they've come into a little bit of money. So what should they do? Should they pay down some of the mortgage? Is there other options? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it depends on the value of the mortgage, your monthly repayment. So if what you find in your monthly mortgage repayments are really high, and you're struggling to make ends meet on a month-to-month basis, obviously that's a way you can minimize your monthly mortgage payments. It's worthwhile just if you just Google monthly mortgage repayment calculator, one will come up on the top of Google, and you can take your current mortgage balance, the current interest rate, and the current term of your mortgage. You can then look at the impact of, say, putting some money into the mortgage and reducing your mortgage value. So if you take, let's call it £20,000 off your mortgage, how does that impact your monthly repayments? If you think it makes, if you're paying a high interest rate on your mortgage, it might be something that you put more money towards. The downside of having money within your property is that it's often difficult to access. So if suddenly you find you need 10, 20, 30,000 pounds from somewhere for a big one-off purchase, trying to get that money out of the property is usually either quite difficult, time consuming, or expensive. So this is probably a personal preference, but I favour having investments and assets that are relatively liquid, i.e. you can get hold of them quite quickly if you need to. So in that situation, once again, it sounds quite boring, right? But I'd probably do a bit of everything. You'd be bulking up your emergency fund if it's not there already, putting some money in the investment ISA, put some money in the pension, and if you think it's going to be suitable for you to overpay on the mortgage, then do so. Just check your mortgage details though, because there are often limits to how much you can overpay on the mortgage. If you're within them, then that's fine.
Brilliant, thank you. Another one here, I know that bothers a lot of people. It's how does one tackle debt whilst trying to save and still live life?
Yeah, good question. There is good debt and there is bad debt. Most people will have debt throughout the duration of their lifetime. because most people have a mortgage, right? A mortgage is a debt. It's usually the biggest debt that people have. It doesn't mean that you should never buy a property just because you're going to get into debt and you've got a mortgage, right? So it's just trying to reframe debt into like a sensible approach. If you've got debt which is high interest rates and spiraling monthly costs, you need to address that as your first point of concern. So if you're talking about disposable income, if we're talking about lump sums that you've got either in your savings account, which we know you don't need, or if you're going to receive lump sums, if debt is expensive to pay back, there's a high interest rate with it. That has got to be your first priority is paying off that debt. Um, if there is debt which is on a relatively low interest, the monthly repayments are very manageable. Just because you've got some debt, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do nothing of anything else. Yes, that should still be your first priority, but it shouldn't then freeze you from still contributing to your pension. Should you continue to look at investment ISA, bulking up your savings and the likes.
Okay, I'm trying my best to catch you out, but you've answered all the questions very clearly straight away without any hesitation. So well done for that. Done a really good job. I think we've got time for one more. There's quite a few others. For those of you that have submitted questions that we don't pick up on the session now, we will pick those up individually for you. And whilst we're just kind of coming on to the last question and wrapping up, it'd be really useful for anybody who's or most of you are still there, actually. That's great. Could you, in the Q&A, if you could just let us know which areas of finance are most important to you right now that we can then look at, and if there's some popular themes, then we'll plan those out for next year. We'll start to get a little bit more focused. So if you just let us know what areas are important to you, that'd be really useful. Okay, so let's have a look. I've got quite a few. I'm just going to try and pick one that I think can benefit everybody. Right. What's your best advice for someone that wants to start financial planning without a lot of disposable income?
Yeah, good question. Spend less money. No, it's not always possible. Whether you're doing this with £50 disposable income, or whether you're doing it with £500 a month disposable income, or 5,000, whatever the figure is, good financial management is all about habits. Okay, I remember sitting down with people when they were earning, say, £40,000, and they say, "Well, when I'm earning £60,000, I'll just save more money." And then you see them when they're earning £60,000, and then they say, "When I'm earning £100,000, I'll just save more money." Right? It doesn't happen. So it's all habitual. Is this process you go through with managing your own money? So whether it's £20 a month, £50 a month, £100 a month, getting into that process of looking at your income coming in, your outgoings, your disposable income, even if there's not much left over, just getting into those good habits of, well, where should I put that money? Whatever the figures are, the figures don't matter. It's the process that you go through. Then what you find is when your pay increases over time, if you get bonuses, you then look at it the same way. So you go through that process again. If the same percentage amount of your income is always going towards savings or ISAs or pensions, as your income increases over time, the actual amount of money going into your lifestyle and enjoying yourself is increasing. You're giving yourself a pay rise, you're giving yourself, your lifestyle an increase, but you're also increasing the value of your investments over time. So yes, it's not always, and sometimes, people have moments in life where, outgoings are significantly higher. They may have, unknown costs that come in, and actually you've got to freeze doing that financial planning that you wanted to do. But it's then sort of flicking that switch and getting into the habit of, right, I need to go again. We've got through that, and actually we need to reassess and look at things and put everything in place that we know we need to do.
Yeah, it's a good session today, I think, because I think I expect a lot of people expected lots of technical talk today, and it's been quite different than what most people would expect, I think. And it's very much about getting to the right kind of habits and behaviors and setting some goals and budgeting, saving, getting into investing, emergency funds, all those sort of things, which is just really, really good advice for people. The product stuff, there's plenty of that out in the industry. So I think this is really, really crucial. So I think it's been a really good session today. I think if the feedback is positive about you, Tom, I think if it's okay, we'll probably want to use you again next year at some point. But I think the key message today was really, let's take control. Let's feel in control. And therefore we're much more resilient. If we can feel in control of most things financially, then we will, we can tackle the challenges that life will throw at us. Okay, they're going to happen, but how well are we prepared to tackle them and deal with them? when they come. So look, thanks very much, Tom. Absolutely brilliant. So it's Thomas Schofield, for anybody who wants to know. This isn't really a pitch for Tom, obviously, but it's only fair to let you know his name is Thomas Schofield, who works at Foster de Novo. But but this isn't why we do it. We're not doing this to promote Tom. But I do know that sometimes people want to send some questions directly to the advisor we've been interviewing. So thanks very much, Tom. That's absolutely brilliant. I'm gonna turn off now, and also I'll pick up the unanswered questions. We'll pick those up and we'll get those emailed out to everybody. So thanks very much for coming on board, all of you, and I look forward to seeing you. We'll promote and let you know the next Financial Fitness Friday, probably going to be in January. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Tom. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Cheers. See you later.